Hey, welcome to the DFL Before DNF podcast. I'm Josh. I feel really lucky today to get to have this conversation with Casey Brady because of her realm of expertise. Sometimes when I do prep for a podcast, I'm doing a deep dive, but like the night before, the morning before, just to make sure I've got some stuff straight. But this episode with Casey is stuff that's been on my mind for years, and so it's just like gonna happen naturally because
Mhm.
I'm curious about things within the 100 miler, and what makes today so special is not only is Casey a physical therapist, but she's also a 100 mile specialist. I'd say it seems like she's out there all the time, or in lotteries all the time, trying to get into something. So
Yeah.
I want to find out today certain things about how to know when to legitimately. How do you know when to actually stop a 100 miler because of an injury mid race, or how do you know when you should keep going and when you should stop? That's my overall nagging question. I've always erred on the side of safety, which I don't regret because I live to run another day. But
Yeah.
this next 100 mile attempt, I'm going to try and push beyond some of that, and we'll see what happens. But before we go any further, Casey, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about just high level as a physical therapist. I mean, this may sound silly, uh, but let's go to the lowest common denominator here. What is physical
Mhm.
therapy?
Yeah. And physical therapy is a lot of different things, honestly. I work in outpatient orthopedics, so I see
Hmm.
all orthopedic injuries. You have physical therapists that treat pediatrics, neuro rehab, so many different areas you could go in. I think around the Salt Lake area, we tend to see a lot of orthopedic injuries because we're also active.
Yeah,
But what I do is orthopedics, basically helping people get back to what they want to do, getting
yeah.
people back to whether it's I want to walk a mile around my block or I want to get back out there and compete on a higher level. That's usually the goal, getting people back to baseline
Hmm.
from injury or surgery.
Okay, and so you're working with. You'd mentioned this before we started, but being in Park City, everyone's an athlete to some degree,
Mhm.
whether they're a weekend warrior or they're like pro skiers in the
Yeah.
U.S. Olympic team or something like that. Are you working with trail runners ever? Do you see them come
Yeah.
through your clinic or your
Yeah.
office?
Yeah, a lot of different runners on a spectrum too. So I have trail runners that are getting into the sport, whether they have friends that are ultra runners and they're trying to ramp up their miles to get into ultra running. And
Hmm.
I also see the professional athletes as well. So it is a wide range, and I absolutely love that because
Hmm.
I love both sides of the sport, and there's different elements to working with people who are getting into it or maybe
Hmm.
just trying to reduce their risk of injury as they're building or maybe training for their first ultra. And then the recovery from someone who does it on a higher level and the impact that has on their professional career.
Hmm. So you'll get people who are contemplating increasing volume significantly, but before they do,
Yeah.
they just want to get a consult.
Yeah. Yeah. I do gait analysis for
Oh,
people who maybe had an injury in the past, resolved it, and are looking just to see if their training is going okay, their gait looks okay. So they're able to ramp up their miles or train for their first 50K and reduce their risk of injury too. So I do see the preventative side of things.
yeah.
I mostly see the injury side, but
Hmm.
also, there are some people who are smart and are like, hey, I don't want to get injured.
Yeah.
So they'll come and see me too.
I did that with my primary care physician so after I saw Unbreakable, read Born to Run, I was like, I want to figure this out. And thankfully, our primary care doctor, Chris Gay, he's paced at the Wasatch 100. He knew that world really well, and an endurance athlete, not always in running, but he did a lot of stuff within his specialty with me, just to be like, hey, if you're going to ramp up like that, here's what you should be thinking about. And his was by and large, from a primary care physician perspective. If I'm coming into your office, let's say it was back in 2013, 2014 when I started to get obsessed with this, is there a general spiel that you have for someone who's about to get into it, or do you get? I mean, obviously there's specifics per person, but what were the general hazards in increasing volume to what it takes to do a 100 miler?
Yeah, great question. And that is where people get injured is they literally ramp up too soon.
Mm.
or they haven't done much running and then they start to build and their body's capacity isn't able to handle that load. So I
Mm.
always say you need to develop a base first. So if you're training, I don't care if you're training for a marathon or 50K, you need to have some base mileage.
Mm.
You can't, I mean, you're going to get injured if you try to do that couch to 50K.
Yeah.
Some people are lucky and they don't, but for the majority of the population is you have to have a base. So if you can give yourself 3 months building your miles, not even worry about training, but just
Hmm.
run and like have
There's
some
time on
sort of
task.
And then the safe rule is don't increase your mileage more than 10% every week. And that
Hmm.
doesn't
Okay.
work for everybody. I think
Yeah.
there are some very experienced runners who can get away with increasing their mileage a lot more than that. But if you're new to the sport, you are or getting back from injury, say you've been injured for the past 6 months to a year, follow
Hmm.
that 10% rule, and that's going to pretty much steer you away from the injury side of things. So I think the
What's
biggest
happening in that? Oh, sorry. You go ahead.
well, I think the biggest risk of injury is the amount of load that we're placing.
Mm.
There are some biomechanical things that happen. There may be previous injury that we have to consider. So there are other factors, but by and large, that's usually too much too soon. Um, yeah.
So when you talk about a base, is that, I mean, for me, the thing that always comes to mind mainly is because like my family history, like of like, I can't think of what it's called, where your bone density like decays or lessens in
Mm.
old age.
Is it like
Is it,
osteoporosis
that's
or?
right. There it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Osteoporosis. And so when you're building a base, how much of that is like bone strength? And like, what is a base? Maybe just generally, what's a
Yeah,
base?
yeah, and I think you do have to you have to and you're not again you're still trying to follow this 10% rule, but you are working on your body, your bones, your ligaments, your joints, all those things, your body's ability to handle just a load of running. Because someone
Yeah.
who maybe it was a cyclist for years and is getting to running, well, they didn't load their bones and their joints like they do when they run. So it's a progression of load, so your bones, your joints, everything can
Progression
handle
of
that
load.
stress.
That's
Because a
good.
lot of times, like people start running and they're like, "My knees hurt," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, it may hurt, and you're not necessarily injured, but you also have to be aware of if they are bothering you. Maybe do a little more cross training and cut back on your mileage a little bit, so your joints aren't as
Mm.
achy or sore after you run. There's also surface area. So if you're running the trails, it's gonna be a lot softer than you trying to pound on cement or
Hmm.
pavement. And that's just, that load principle too.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, so much of us in this sport of ultra trail running are we're evangelists. Like we want to see other people go out because it's meant so much to us. We want to see other people go out there. And the most common thing, like I think about talking to my brothers, like oh, but my knees hurt so much, and I
Hmm.
realize that could be a range of things, and some of them could be very legitimate. Like yeah, you shouldn't run because X Y Z. But the common and maybe it's just because my brothers don't want to just say, I just don't want to. That sounds awful.
Yeah,
But
and that's
they're
okay.
saying it's their knees. What do you think when people are having that beginning knee injury, like how would you explain what that is? Like what's going on that as being a barrier to entry?
Yeah. So if you have legitimate injury and I say if it's not just achy soreness versus injury, is if you start to have pain with your normal everyday life, where it's like, oh, I start to feel my knee when I go up and down stairs, or when I'm not doing running, when I'm not doing my sport, I feel that pain. I get out of bed and I may feel it. I
Mm.
go take the dog for a walk and I feel it. So you're approaching injury level where okay, this is not just normal everyday kind of soreness, and
Mm.
maybe the pain gets more sharp. It gets when you go to stand up, that's when you feel it. So there is, and
Hmm.
sometimes it's hard to tell, is it just
Yeah.
normal achiness from building mileage versus pain. So it affects your everyday
Mm.
life. Take some days off, do a little cross
Yeah.
training. And runners like to run. They don't like to cross train. Like,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want to get
Yeah.
on a bike. Like, I want to be out running. Or maybe just say like, go for a hike. Like, go, hiking up a hill is actually going to be strengthening for you.
Yeah.
Coming downhill is another situation. But
Sure.
yeah, if it starts to affect your everyday life, that's probably when you should talk to someone about what do I need to do to lessen this pain. Whether maybe you try to take a few days off, a week off and it's not getting better,
Mm.
then maybe go and talk to someone. Had a good look at it.
Interesting. So the knee pain, even thinking one of my wife's issues is she feels some certain knee pain at kind of mid-level mileage only while running.
Mm,
Never the next morning, never that afternoon. When she stops running, the pain's gone.
mm.
And so even I'm not trying to do a telemedicine thing here with you, but just to say, like, your point being, if it's lasting beyond the run, that's not necessarily telling something specific other than pay attention to that. If sometimes there's just injuries that happen that are contained within the run. I mean, what's a general
Yeah.
observation on that?
Yeah. So if it's while you run, I would say, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say stop running.
Yeah.
If it does last and linger longer than the run, or when she's walking around, then I would say, well, let's take a closer look. But if it's only while the run, I guess my question is like, how long has she been running for? Is it something that will get better as she develops more mileage and has more capacity to handle that load of running? What
Mm.
is the surface area? What elevation? Is it only when she's running downhill? Um,
Mm.
there's a lot of different factors. I would say uphill is so much better than downhill. There's more stress on the body. And then also taking a look at the biomechanics. So if she's running
Mm.
just on flat surface and she still feels it, well, is there something to take a closer look at her gait? Is she weak in some area that she could improve on that would help lessen the impact on her knees?
Mm.
So it's kind of multifactorial where it's not
Yeah.
just one certain thing. And maybe taking a closer look on that if it doesn't go away. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I've been running for years and it's always been this way. Well,
Yeah.
maybe take a look at the gait and the mechanics and see if that has something to do with it.
Yeah, I think of all the number of things it takes to run an ultra, a 100 miler, it's really easy to find information. And it's, even if it's opposed, you can find nutritional information. You should always do this and never do that. And, you can find everything, training plans, Hal Kerner's, guide to, field guide to ultra running. The
Mhm.
thing that's hardest to find is information
Yeah.
on mechanics. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, where do people go for that? I mean, do you have to go to a professional? Is that probably the way to go?
I think you can read things on running mechanics, but the problem is we never look at ourselves run. And we
That's
never
right.
see ourselves like what we actually look at. Even when I have like video of myself running, I'm like, I actually look like that. Like, you just you don't know.
I
And
know.
so, going to see somebody and actually taking film at different vantage points. And it's like, oh yeah, this is what your pelvis is doing. Your pelvis is
Hmm.
dropping, your hips are weak, your feet are collapsing. So there's a
Hmm.
lot of different things that could be happening in your gait cycle that you would just never
Oh,
know. I will say is a little more important for road runners because they're so much more linear and they're just like running at, there may be some rolling hills.
right.
With trail runners and mountain runners, I think we can get away with poor mechanics because we're not always running. Maybe we're power hiking, so we're changing our
Yeah.
muscle groups a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um, but if we're doing a runnable 100-mile race, like, yeah, your biomechanics are going to play a huge role into how your body is feeling in that moment.
Hmm.
Um, but running 100 miles, you're also going to hurt, and you have to know you are going to hurt. And it may
Yeah.
not be anything specific, or you may not be actually injured, but your feet hurt, your knees hurt, your hips hurt, and you just plow on through.
Yeah.
And I think
Okay.
that's,
There. I mean, so that's the money question. That's what I'm here for. How do
yeah.
you know? How do you know mid race? Okay. Let's go ahead and establish you as an ultra runner. Let's talk a little bit about you as a 100 miler before we get into that sort of money question. What I mean, talk about your race schedule just over the last couple of years. What are some of the highlights of the 100 milers, and what do you have coming up next?
Yeah, I think my one of my biggest years was 2022. I
Okay.
did Tahoe 200, Tusher's 100K, and then I did UTMB, and that was a big. It
That's
was
a
a
big
big
year. I didn't.
commitment.
I'm sorry. I didn't know you did the Tahoe 200. I knew of the others. That's crazy.
Yeah, so I did those three, and they were June, July, end of August,
And you did
and
the
then
UTMB main event, the 106
and
mile.
then UTMB was
Yeah.
like the race.
Yeah.
But then I also decided to do Bear 100. So yeah, let's just throw another race into the loop. But I will say that is when I got injured, and I like had an avulsion fracture to my ankle. And who knows, fluky things happen, but it was a
Hmm.
big year. And
Yeah.
and we can talk about that, like how stupid a physical therapist can be when it comes to injuries too.
It's actually
So
very comforting. It's nice to know that it's not just us people who
yeah,
don't know things.
yeah, it was like the heat of the moment. I was like, oh, I felt my ankle pop. This really hurts. It's really swollen. Let's run 60
Hmm.
more miles on it and see how it
Let's just
feels.
see.
Like,
Let's see if it works itself out.
yeah, and it didn't. And that was my only DNF. And I'm like, well, one, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
That was a bad choice. And yeah, in hindsight, I probably should have dropped at the moment. So
Hmm.
um, but yeah, that was like a big year. And then last year, kind of like recovering from the ankle, I did a little more kind of like runnable stuff. I will say last year was the year of like everything got canceled. Where I was supposed to do Tahoe again. It got pushed to
Hmm.
July, so I didn't do that one.
Hmm.
I ran a race in Colorado Springs. I did the Foothills 50K
Oh
last
yeah.
May.
Good job.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Thanks.
Um, so I kind of picked more like runnable stuff. Vermont
Yeah.
100 got canceled, so I did a race in Oregon instead. But picked less mountainous races, just knowing like I was going to protect my ankle from the technical terrain. And
Hmm.
this coming year, I have Tahoe 200 planned because I was like, I'm going to
Okay.
do that one again. And we'll see. I right now I'm scheduled to do Vermont. Got into
Is
Wasatch.
Vermont the one? I was talking with Josh Landvatter the other day. Is that the one that's the horse race still? Also,
Yeah, yeah,
I can't believe that. That is so
yeah.
cool to
I
actually
know.
race horses.
Running against the horses. And
Yeah.
I will say that's you think Vermont, it's all on basically dirt roads, but sneaky vert. Like I think you get
Mm.
like I don't know, like 17,000 feet in
Mm.
16, 17 in just like rolling hill kind of dirt roads. So
Wow.
very up down. I don't think anything is really flat. It's just a lot of like rolling
Yeah.
terrain.
So
Um,
I apologize. I cut you off. After Vermont, what's after Vermont?
That's the mystery because I got into
Okay.
Wasatch, but I'm kind of like I'm not sure. I may have like a traveling conflict, so
Okay.
I'm in the Run Rabbit law like wait list. So if I don't do Wasatch, I'll try to do Run Rabbit.
Because you at one point were contemplating a Grand Slam this year, maybe. Did
I
you say
was,
something about that?
and maybe not Grand Slam. That would be cool one day. I was just
Yeah.
thinking I actually like my ultimate goal was to do Moab 240, but I didn't
Yeah.
get in. So I
Okay.
would have like done 200 milers in one year.
Okay.
And
Is
yeah,
Moab
but
240 a
that's
lottery right now?
yeah.
Okay.
And it's pretty hard. I think you don't move much off those lotteries anyway. So I
If
think
you get
there's a
in,
very slim chance that I would get in.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you've got big stuff. You're 100. You're a 200 miler. So help us out. Like I mean, on some levels, the joke that a plumber's pipes are always leaky. Like a plumber knows how to go fix other people's houses, but their own pipes are leaking at their own home.
Yeah.
So you know, you can offer advice, but at the same time, like when you're out on the trail, like you said at the bear, it's like you're just in it and you love it, and maybe you kept going.
hmm
What is your advice, regardless, even if you take it or not? Because we all know what it's like to be in it, but like what's maybe the best practice advice around knowing when to stop and knowing when to keep going? What's an injury mid race that you think, okay, I could plow through this? How do you know if it's going to be long term or not?
Yeah. And that's a great question. And I think there's a fine line because like, everything is going to hurt in some aspect. I think if you feel a pop, you probably
Mhm.
should you should keep going.
Okay,
Like
I mean, as funny as
that's
that is, it's like, hey, great, there's something objective. If something pops,
if
chill.
something pops, it probably is not good.
Yeah.
Uh and it was like an audible pop where people around me, like my husband was like, "Was that your shoe?" I was like, "No,
Are
that's my
you
shoe."
serious?
Yeah, it was loud. And yeah, that was like mile 18. I don't, it was very early on the race.
And your husband is a physician, right?
Yeah, so he's an orthopedic.
Orthopedic? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So he hears the
So
pop. It's nice to also run
between
with
the
someone
two
like
of
that.
us, yeah, between the two of
Yeah.
us, we're like, that's probably not good. Um, and I think you're just so tunnel vision and like what your goal is, that I was like not seeing the bigger picture. And then I
Mhm.
rolled it again the same race, like 30 miles in, and I just knew I was like the ibuprofen's still kicking in, but once that ibuprofen wore off, my ankle was so unstable.
Ooh,
But
yeah.
kind of going back to your question is, if you're having sharp pains that are causing you to limp, to change your mechanics, you
Mm,
probably just need to stop and reassess. So if you're getting
mm,
into that limp stage where, when you're running 100 miles, your muscles tend to get really tight in certain areas. So you may feel like, oh, my hip feels a little tight. Well, maybe you could work that out at an aid station and be good to go. But
yeah.
if you're like legit limping and there maybe the pain gets a little bit more sharp,
Mm-hmm.
you got to stop and reevaluate that.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you notice inflammation too, if there's actually some swelling going on, you know that there is some trauma happening to a certain.
Mm,
Um, and a lot of that stuff is like traumatic things. So if you were to fall and bust your knee open, maybe reassess. Is it something that you could run through? Or
mm-hmm.
like by bandaging up, or is it something that you are continuing to limp for the next 10 miles? The pain is not getting better. The pain may actually be getting worse. And then
Mm-hmm.
you have to make that decision. Is this worth it? Is
That's
this worth
right.
it? And I think that's what I felt when I was around the bear. I got to the point where I'm like, my ankle longevity is more important than
Yes.
this race.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I like undid the bandage and saw how swollen it was, this guy next to me was like, "You've been running on that?" Yeah, not good.
Stop.
So, but I've had races where my hip felt tight, and so this happened in Javelina, and I kind of laughed just thinking about it. As I was like, "Oh, my hip flexor feels tight. It's not like I'm injured." So I
Mm-hmm.
found a rock. I was like, "I'm gonna find a rock," and I just laid on that rock, and I released my
Oh.
hip flexor
Oh
during the
my
race.
gosh.
And I did a couple times and I felt great. I was like, I just needed to release this area that was starting to feel a little tight. And when I got back to like the crew tent, I like, kind of massaged it out with like a roller real quick.
Yeah.
Then I was good to
So you're
go.
just
So
laying on the trail, laying on a rock.
yeah, and everyone's like, "Are
That's
you
awesome.
okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just
I'm a
releasing my hip
professional.
flexor. Yeah, I know what I'm doing." Yeah, so those are instances where I was like, I know this is just tightness, where it
Mhm.
is feeling uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
I can work this out and I can
Huh.
carry on. It's not something that's going to pull me from the race, but if I
Yeah.
don't do something about it, it could become pain. So
Yeah.
I need to just release this area and then I can carry on. And I think a lot of times is, you feel these things, and when you're done with these races, and that's when you start to put like Humpty Dumpty back together again, where it's like
Hmm.
there was a reason why my hip was getting tight. So I need to
Oh.
work on that. Or there was a reason why this happened. I need to do my like a little, kind of self rehab work on these areas to
Hmm.
yeah, make sure it doesn't happen 3 months from now.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when you talk about releasing the hip flexor, because that's one of my main things that like a hip flexor will get tight. Are you literally just like applying like sharp pressure to the hip flexor area?
Hmm.
And when you say
Yep.
release, what's in it that needs to be released? What does that mean?
It's like tightness all within the muscle. You could feel like where the tendon inserts on the bone, that could actually start to feel a little bit tight too. So you're
Hmm.
literally, I mean, I was taking like a rock and I just laid it down right where it was tight and I just
Uh-huh.
let it release, and I was probably on the ground for a few minutes just
Uh-huh.
letting that, and I could feel it. As soon as I stood up, I was like, oh, that feels so much better.
Wow.
Um, so next time that happens to you in Zion, you just find a nice rock
That's
and you can lay
awesome.
right on it.
I
Or
love
have
that.
your crew bring a tennis
Yeah.
ball or cross ball and lay
Yeah.
on that. Hmm.
Yeah, so that was my next question. What tools do you have in your drop bags, that are
Hmm.
maybe physical therapy related? Do you have like a Theragun? Is that a thing in the physical therapy
I
world?
I don't typically bring a Theragun only because I don't usually have crew. For Tahoe, I had crew, so I'm
Okay.
usually pretty self
Okay.
supported other than drop bags. So I'll bring a tennis ball or a lacrosse ball,
Okay.
where I'll have it just as needed. And I did bring one of those like stick rollers to Javelina because I did have a crew then, and that was
Hmm.
nice. So I could just have that and kind of roll out because your quads just feel kind of tight and achy, and just kind of rolling those out real quick can do a world of difference.
Hmm. Well,
So
that's
I
cool.
usually have some sort of like massage tool just in
Yeah.
case. And I don't always need it, but it's kind of nice to have that in a drop bag or with your crew just in case.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to also hear kind of your thoughts on the overarching question of like my season one of the podcast of how do you keep going? Is there a moment that you can recall that's like stands out above the other times where you're in the middle of a say a 200 or a 100 or even a 50K, whatever, where you just thought I need to quit,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not popping noise related, and you're just like I'm gonna
Yeah,
quit,
it's
I'm gonna quit, I'm gonna quit, and then
mhm.
you don't, and you keep going.
Yeah.
Do you have any moments like that?
100%. The first time I really thought like I don't think I can keep going was the Bryce 100.
Oh,
And it was
that's a hard
hot.
one.
I was like getting low on sodium, but my body wasn't recovering. And I got to an aid station, and the aid station captain was amazing. He's like, lay down for 5-10 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
have another salt pill or whatever you need, some sort of sodium, and you're going to feel better. And I did. And I just
Hmm.
needed to lay down. And like, honestly, there's only been one 100-mile race that I haven't just had a moment where I laid down and pressed that reset button. And then I was like, I'm good. I'm good to go. Like, I
Wow.
just needed a little bit of a reset. So that was first time. Tahoe
Mm-hmm.
200, I had a very low moment, 100 miles in. Um, I felt like garbage. I
Really.
was probably lower on my nutrition than I should
Mm-hmm.
have been. So I needed to
Yeah.
refuel. I was tired. I needed to lay down and rest. And I thought, I'm only halfway through this race. How am I going to keep going?
Mm-hmm.
And same thing. I needed food and a lay down. And then
Hmm.
those two things, it was a game changer. So
Hmm.
you can always feel better. If you can always feel better if you just press that little reset. If you're feeling like
Hmm.
garbage, just do one of two things. Just lay down for a second, or see if you can take in some food. And if your stomach is off,
Yeah.
then lay down first because that can kind of reset your gut a little bit, slow
Hmm.
down. Then you can start to eat a little bit, and that can make the world a difference as well. Um, the latest one I would say I almost thought I was like I wanted to drop was I did Black Canyon 100K this past February. It
Nice.
was one of those races where I'm like, this is not going well. This
Really.
is not okay. I knew it early on. Mile 30, so halfway, I
Mm-hmm.
had contemplated, if I didn't invest so much time into this race, I would have just been like, I'm out. But
Mm-hmm.
I had that tunnel vision drive, like, no, I'm finishing this. Like,
Hmm.
I've traveled here, I've done it. I am going to finish what I started,
Mm-hmm.
even though it was at the time I wanted. No, was it the like result of how everything played out? Absolutely not. But
Hmm.
I just wanted to finish. Like I just wanted
Yeah.
to have that cross that finish line check done. And I think you kind of have to get into that tunnel vision mindset of like
Yeah.
just one foot in front of the other. Even though if you feel like crap, this is not your day, you can always reset by laying down, eating, and
Mm-hmm.
seeing how you feel after that. So even like
That's great.
5-10 minutes can make the world a difference.
So you, I mean, you're in Park City, which is like 7,200 feet above sea level,
Mm.
and you ran Black Canyons, which January, did you say, or is that February?
It was February, yeah, like second weekend of February.
So you're training in Park City where it's freezing, and then
Yeah.
you go. And I don't know the elevation of where Black Canyons is. I don't know if it's high desert or low desert, but it's definitely
Yeah.
warmer. Do you have
Hmm.
any tips for going from? I was talking to some guys last night who are in like Tennessee area. They want to come run a West Coast Wasatch or something like that. They just can't get the training where they're at for it.
Hmm.
So I think about loving these desert races, and I'll go run Zion next month, which isn't terribly different. What's one of the things I like about it? It's like 3,200 feet above sea level. I'm at 4,200.
Yeah.
Going from a place where you're training super cold to the hot. Do you train for that change?
Yeah, and I normally would do like a little heat training or get in a sauna, but
Mm.
Black Canyon was actually not going to be too hot. It actually snowed at the beginning of the race,
Oh
so
my
it
gosh,
wasn't.
that's right.
Yeah, I wasn't worried about the heat. Like it did
Yeah,
get, I was running in like a tank, which for normal people would have been cold to, but
yeah.
I'm just no. I will say the hardest part of running that race was going from this high elevation where we do have snow covered trails where
Hmm.
I'm only running on snow covered trails
Yeah.
or the road or a treadmill. Like that's not mimicking desert rocky.
Hmm.
terrain where my legs just felt a little bit beat up because I hadn't been used to running on dry trails in months. So I think that played a factor in how my legs felt
Hmm.
too. Um, but yeah,
Is
coming
the
from cold.
trail I mean, anecdotally, oh, are you there? Did I lose you?
Oh, yep. Hmm.
Oh, sorry. Anecdotally, like the trail, I always say when friends who are road marathons, like, oh, come run trail. Like my body hurts worse when I run a road marathon than when I
Hmm.
finish 100Ks. I mean, that's true, right? Like there's something
Hmm.
to that. Like the trail is actually absorbing in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. Like my joints don't hurt nearly, and like even your muscles get beat up from running on the road so
Yeah.
much. So,
Yeah.
yeah, just the impact is so much softer.
Hmm.
But I think for me, it was like the technicality piece of how much like downhill that had, and then just having to like think again about, oh, I have to change my footing, and I have to like navigate along these rocks where
Right.
I'm like running on snow, and you could just like put it on cruise control, almost like you do on the road,
Yeah.
where you actually, when you're back on trail, you have to be focused in where you're placing your feet.
Yeah.
Sort of constantly, you can't zone out on a trail run or you're gonna
Right.
fall.
Yeah. Are you a music person while running? Or headphones or?
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth where I'll just shut my music off for a little bit because I just kind of get sick of listening to something. But at
Yeah.
night, it's kind of helpful
Hmm.
where I'm maybe getting a little tired. I'm starting to feel like things are getting a little, deep into it. I'll put on
Yeah.
something just to keep me going. And that is helpful too.
And so you talked about maybe being light on crew. Are you doing overnights by yourself sometimes?
Yeah, and like John and I will run a lot of like these big races together, which is kind of
Hmm.
like we're crewing each other.
Yeah.
We've never had a low moment where both of us are feeling like garbage, which that's kind of
Oh,
nice.
wow.
So, um, I would say Tahoe, we did Tahoe together, and that we kind of, which was not great, we kind of piggybacked our sleep. Like I would sleep and he would sleep, and I'm like, this is not working, we have to get on the same page here. But
Hmm.
luckily, when I'm in full on hallucination and seeing SpongeBob on the trail, like he's actually doing okay. So
That's
it's like,
nice.
yeah, maybe you should just lay down for a second and
Though I think it will be a great story when both of you are seeing SpongeBob at the same time as well. I think that would
I
be.
know.
You just
Yeah,
made
exactly.
DNF, but it'd be fun.
Yeah, exactly. We made
All right, before we wrap up, tell me about what else you're up to in Park City. I see you quite busy with Women of the Wasatch. What do you have going on
it.
up there?
Yeah, so doing Women of the Wasatch every Sunday, and that's been a lot of fun. Yeah, and hopefully get another kind of day where we can all like run together and doing some
Yeah,
events there. And I'm always busy with life and
yeah,
kids and work and all the
yeah. I
things
see
and
that.
side
Yeah,
projects.
that's a lot to be. I mean, 100 miler is enough to train for and to have kids, but
Mm-hmm.
to have the job that you and your husband have, to have kids, and for
Hmm.
both of you to be ultra runners, like just
Yeah.
maybe you guys don't need as much sleep. I don't know how you do it.
I know. I always say like I'm spinning like 20 plates at all times.
Yeah.
And I
Do
think
you
I'm the
like
kind of
that?
person that needs to stay busy in some
Yes.
aspect.
Yep.
But then I also need my moments of like, I literally don't even want to talk for the next 30 minutes because,
Yes.
when you're in your job, you're working one on one with somebody and there's just
Yeah.
very high demand. And then when I come home, I have two little boys who are very high demand. Like,
Yeah.
and so you're always kind of having to be accommodating. And my kids are not old enough where they can do everything by themselves, which I'm trying to
Right.
push for that. But
What are
as
their
you know,
ages?
7 and 4.
Yep,
So,
I've got 4, 7, and 10.
oh, so
I
you
can't wait for that 4-year-old to fully be able to buckle his own seatbelt. That's going to be a mile
exactly.
marker.
I know, like you just like get in the car and then
Yeah,
buckle your belt and let's go.
I can't
Um,
imagine what that'll feel like.
I know, one day.
Yeah,
But it's a lot. And I always feel like there is this heavy load that I'm always carrying, but I also love it. I think I
yeah,
thrive in a little bit of chaos. And that's probably
hmm,
why I like ultra running,
yeah,
because I, I kind of like having challenges
yeah.
and I can manage those challenges.
I love that.
So
Yeah, are you introverted or extroverted?
A little bit of both, I would
Yeah.
say. You know,
Yeah. Kind of
I
toe the line.
definitely have a lot of me that I'm a little bit more, and especially as a kid, I was very shy.
Yeah.
I think as I've gotten older, I've become a little bit more of like
Yeah.
extroverted. I think I have to be with what I do. I work with people all day, so
Yes.
um, I was, you know, if I tell you those like I don't know what they were called, but those little quiz that you would take, like, are you introvert, extrovert? I'm like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
kind of feel like I'm a little bit of this and a little bit of
Yeah.
that. Like, you know,
Yeah.
do I like to go out and do social things? 100%. But do I also like to just like chill on the couch and read a book? Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got to
So,
imagine like the one-on-one physical therapy thing. So for me, the reason I asked is just like I'm fairly introverted. So for my work day, I had not been talking until I started the podcast a few months ago. I wasn't ever talking to anybody except, I'd come
mhm.
home and talk to my wife and kid. Now that I'm talking a lot, like I'm introverted. So I'm a high functioning introvert or a low functioning extrovert. So,
I
but most
love
people
that.
think I'm extroverted, but I genuinely recharge alone. So most of my runs are alone because it's the only way that I can like get my head, because I talk a lot. I'm so curious, but then I get all this information from you. I want to be able to regurgitate this information either to myself or to my friends, but I have to go on a run and then like put it in a filing cabinet in my brain. Like I have to kind
Yeah.
of pull like, okay, what did she say about that? Put it in. So as I'm having the more conversations I have with people, it's exponential how much time I need alone. And to me,
Hmm.
that's what my training, like right now, trying to get around 2 hours on my feet, 5 or 6 days a week right now is just mission critical to my survival.
Yeah. No, I love that term, like highly functioning introvert. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah,
I think, you know, having those alone times where you're just, I'm gonna go for a run, because for me it's like, yeah, I'm listening to people all day, whether it's my kids, you know,
yeah,
patients, and I'm like, I just want a little clarity and just run and not think about anything, and you just
yep,
kind of have your moment of zen. Like, this is my zen moment where I can
yes,
just a little self-reflection, like you said.
yep,
And that's super important, I think, for just everyone's mental health. Like, I'm just going to have a little clarity and have a little mindfulness on the trail.
yeah. I think everyone is going to resonate with this thriving in chaos piece. And so here's my question for you as a last question. As I think about Zion, like my life has been about getting ready for Zion on April 13th, the next month. I don't have a race after that. And my family, we're looking to actually move to France for a year.
Wow.
We leave July 15th. We bought one-way tickets.
Wow.
And but I don't have a race after that. And so like there's this thriving in chaos. So talk about thriving in chaos. We're going to move to France. And the way that you have to move to France, it's challenging in terms of if you're going to go on vacation to France, you can book an Airbnb months in advance. But if you're trying to get a 12-month lease, you can't get that until like 45 days before you leave. And so it's like,
Huh.
talk about thriving in chaos. But how do you handle spending a year planning for Tahoe 200 and then it's over?
Mm.
Whether you do great or not. And
Yeah.
there's that like
Let
post
down.
melancholy. Do you
Hmm.
always have another race? I mean, how do you think about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, nowadays you have to kind of line out your race schedule pretty early because everything's like a
Oh,
lottery now.
true.
And so, and sometimes I feel myself like throwing your name into that, like too many hats, because you're like, well, if I don't get into this, like I need a backup plan or something.
Yeah.
So, in some ways, yeah, there's always like a little bit of a backup to a race, but there certainly have been races where you look forward to it so much, and then
Mm-hmm.
when it's over, you kind of feel a little sad, and you're like,
Yes.
wow, it's over. That all these
Uh-huh.
months of training, all the things I put
Oh,
into it,
yeah.
and maybe that's why you seek doing something else, because you want to replace that void that trail,
Yeah.
that training, and that race just
Yeah.
left you.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I've totally been there. And I think a lot of people have, is we put
Yeah.
so much time into it and
Yeah.
we dedicate it, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And
I'm finding myself overlooking Zion in some ways and already thinking about, what April 15th is going to be like. Like, oh my God,
Mhm.
it's over.
Yeah. Well,
So maybe the lesson is first off, learn how to be more present. Just enjoy the race. I'm already thinking what's it going to feel like when it's over, and I haven't even ran
mhm.
it yet.
It's true. And I think we all need to do that. You're not alone when we say, okay, live in the moment right
Yeah.
now. Because, yeah, then we could get down this like total rabbit hole of always seeking something better, always getting our next fix on another race or some other thing planned. So,
Hmm.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then moving to France, like you'll have so much opportunity for
I know.
really cool things. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. I mean, so
Where?
there's, well, okay. So I have a kind of a business network, and a lot of Borderlands was conceptualized while I was in Paris for 3 months in
Mhm.
2022 and 2023. So we'll do Paris for sure for a chunk,
Mhm.
but ideally also like my dream, and it's harder to figure out. So we talked about trying to get 12-month lease, but there's also a scenario where we get a 3-month lease in the north, a 3-month lease in the
Oh.
east. So like Chamonix
Just
area, or
like
at least
move
Alps,
around a little
Annecy.
bit.
Yeah. So three at the top, three at the right, three at the bottom, three at the left.
Mm.
Like maybe Toulouse or something like that. But everything that I do, I can do remotely. I'm teaching a course at the University of Utah, and that can even be done remotely. Everything I'm doing,
Okay.
Borderlands, the app, everything. So my son, before he hits junior high, we wanted to do this for a long time, and it just feels like it's either now or in 14 years.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, that's so cool.
yeah.
I think that's the beauty of the remote, which I'm always a little envious of. I was like, you can just like go somewhere and then continue to work. I can't
Yeah.
bring everyone to me, but that's amazing. And I think,
Yeah.
like your kids are going to have this experience that
Hmm.
they couldn't get living here.
Yeah.
So
And if they can
so
capture French, I think that would be amazing. We're still trying to figure out how to navigate school. So if anyone's listening and has the insight, I'd take it. But,
mhm.
we've heard that, like, for example, like a Montessori school or something like that, they'll allow you to pop in for a month at a time. It's just that they're French, they're starting from zero.
Mm.
So that's the uphill. But that's also like, I want them to face that challenge of being dropped in and not knowing anything. I think that would be
Yeah.
great
Yeah,
for
I
them
think
long term.
yeah, I mean, your kids like they'll be little sponges and they'll just pick it up. Probably the
Yeah.
4-year-old more than any of them
Yes. Yeah.
because they're just like
He's not even
absorbing
that great with
everything that's
English.
happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's amazing. And
Yeah.
um, I can't wait to see pictures of that.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
Yeah.
And I hope to do a lot with trail running out there because a lot of my network has to do with trail running. And I'm excited to see, because when we think about Europe, we think about things like UTMB, but
Mhm.
the Wasatch vibe of a race is very healthy over there. Like the local non-corporate, like those races are everywhere. It's just that we don't
Mhm.
hear about them. So I'm excited to go
Yeah.
find some of those.
Oh yeah, I know. I think that is amazing because yeah, you hear about the UTMBs, the big races, but there's
Yeah.
so much out there.
So much.
Um, yeah, and giving back to those local small trail races that are probably really like beasts within themselves. Like
Absolutely. Through the I mean, they're still in the Alps, a lot of them. So they're
yeah.
still wild vert, but
Hmm.
still only 100 people, 150 people running it.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah,
that's what
those
I'm
are
going to
more
look
fun.
for.
I mean, UTMB, it's great. It's wonderful. Like it's fun. It's gorgeous.
It's a
But
party. Yeah.
you're in a conga line, so these smaller races is you can actually probably enjoy the view a little bit more because you're not
Yes.
staring at someone's back the whole time. So
Yeah. And the aid stations are less rigid from what I understand in terms of like, you still, like, it's like running my Salt Lake Foothills 50K. It's like, you're running into an aid station. There's no protocol. Just come grab something. And, ideally there it'd be more like local type snacks and food.
yeah,
So,
very cool. I'm
yeah.
excited for you.
Well, thanks for joining me today. I hope to do this again sometime. It's fun.
Yeah,
Thankfully, I guess I've never needed to go to a physical therapist for something that's happened, but from a preventative standpoint, it's great to chat with you. So maybe we can do it again.
100%. And good luck on
Okay.
Zion.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Thanks. All right. Appreciate
All
that.
right.
See ya.
Take care. Bye.